They drugged the Deathworld girl after lunch. She woke up, killed them all, and left no trace. The observation deck smelled like ozone and something burnt. Kes had noted this when he first arrived at his station, and he had logged it as ambient environmental variance, non-significant. That was 6 months ago. He had not updated the log since. He was standing in front of a display case now, not a monitoring station, and the air here smelled like polymer sealant and recycled light. But the ozone memory was still in his neural record, still tagged as non-significant, and he was beginning to think he had been wrong about that. The brass thimble was smaller than he expected. He had replayed the recording 340 times. He had watched the optical scan in slow motion, frame by frame, at 1/8 standard speed. He had read the sensor logs and the pharmaceutical reports and the revised archive entries and the transfer documentation for Cadet Marisvale, filed under Advanced Independent Study, which was not a program that existed before 47 days ago. He had done all of this, and he still could not account for why the thimble looked smaller inside the reinforced polymer case than it had in the recording. The dent on its left side was exactly as deep. The wear pattern was exactly as smooth. But the case made it look like a mistake, like something that had been placed there because no one knew where else to put it. The plaque beneath it read, Human Artifact 1, Survival Catalyst. Kes had looked up catalyst in 14 translation databases. He understood the chemical definition. He understood the institutional definition. He did not understand which one the plaque meant, and he had decided after the 11th translation attempt that the Academy did not know either. No resistance, no fear response, no biological marker the system knew how to name. That was what the monitors had shown. That was what Kes had logged in his official capacity as observer-validator for Standard Cycle 7 Alpha in Chamber 7 of the Meridian Academy Classification Testing Facility. He had filed it under Anomalous Subject Response under review. He was still reviewing it. He suspected he would be reviewing it for the rest of his operational life. 6 months ago, a Thursday in Standard Cycle 7 Alpha, a 16-year-old human girl eating lunch from a thermal tray in a room designed to kill her. The VEX 441 protocol had run for 340 Earth days at that point. 18 previous Class 9 subjects. Not one had survived. The girl had been assigned to the program 11 hours before Kes took his station on Observation Deck Beta. He had been told the trial would conclude in under 12 minutes. It had not concluded in under 12 minutes. Stay close, because the system was not wrong, it had simply never met her before. 11 hours before the trial, on the morning of Standard Cycle 7 Alpha, Kes had filed into Observation Deck Beta with his 6 bodies and taken his position at the left monitoring cluster. The deck was quiet. It smelled of the same recycled air that moved through every room in the Academy, with a faint trace of Qualari thermal output near the administrator's station, warm, biological, slightly sweet. Protocol Administrator Thex was already at his post, his clustered form settled into the raised chair, his thermal note a steady amber in the cool light. He looked the way he always looked before a trial, certain. Kes liked certainty. His 6 bodies produced it through synchronization, through the hum of matched neural output that kept all 6 of his minds reading the same moment at the same frequency. He felt the hum now, standing on the deck, and it felt like it always felt. Solid, even, safe. Chamber 7 was visible through the observation window. Reinforced polymer, one-way opaque, 4 meters wide. The chamber itself was 12 meters by 8, climate-controlled, sealed. The monitoring equipment ran along the left wall, 12 biometric sensors, a respiratory array, cardiac and neurological trackers, a pharmaceutical delivery system with 2 IV lines and a pressure regulator. The optical sensor array was mounted above the main hatch. 47 species recognition profiles, programmed to flag any biological signature that did not match an approved exit clearance. It was, by every standard the Academy used, a perfectly calibrated room. A door opened on the far side of the chamber. A girl walked in. Kes noted gray coveralls, standard Academy issue. Brown hair, shoulder length, not secured. A thermal tray in both hands, lunch from the administrative canteen, still warm with a cloth folded on the corner. She was 16 years old. Her file said she had been born in a region of Earth called the American South. Her file also said she had scored in the 94th percentile on Academy intake assessment, which Kes had found interesting, and then had stopped finding interesting when Dr. Sarath reminded him that 94 percentile scores were statistically irrelevant to VEX 441 outcomes. She sat down. She began to eat. She did not look at the observation window. Kes logged. Subject arrived Chamber 7 at 8:47 standard. Baseline effect, calm. No visible stress response. Below that, because he logged two versions of everything, he wrote, clarification required, no stress response or no visible stress response. These are different measurements. He did not transmit the second line. Dr. Sareth moved to his station on the far right of the observation deck. He was Threxian, like Kess, 4 bodies, not 6. His harmonics set at a slightly higher register than institutional baseline. His crystalline shoulder plates caught the light when he moved. He pulled up his pre-trial checklist with the ease of a person who had run this protocol many times without it failing. Compound is batch 791, Sareth said, his voice carrying the particular tone of someone reading aloud for the record. Vex 441, concentration 0.35, prepared at 6:30 standard. Delivery system pressurized, 2-minute alert before administration. Any questions from the panel? No one on the panel had questions. They never did. In Chamber 7, Maris Vale finished the first third of her meal. She ate slowly, without urgency. She had the manner of someone with nowhere to be, which was strange because she was in a sealed room. Pharmaceutical technician, you may begin setup. The technician, a young Miss Vari, his dark filaments pressed close to his body in the way that meant he was trying to be unnoticeable, moved to the chamber's inner door and entered. He carried the IV preparation kit. He was precise. He was professional. He did not make eye contact with the subject. Maris watched him prepare the IV line. She watched his hands. She did not stop eating. This was Kess's first wrong log of the day. He wrote, "Subject observes preparation without fear response." What he should have written, or rather what he thought about writing and decided was unprofessional, was, "Subject observes preparation the way a quality control inspector observes a production line." The VEX 441 protocol had been designed for subjects who feared it. Or more precisely, it had been designed without considering that a subject might not. Is the air supposed to taste like copper? The question came from Chamber 7, from Maris Vale. She had asked it the way someone might ask about an unusual noise from a cooling system, not alarmed, just noting the fact and waiting for an explanation. The room on the observation deck went quiet in a different way than it had been quiet before. Thex's thermal node shifted, just slightly, a fractional increase in temperature that Kess's sensors registered as 0.4 degrees above his baseline. It was the kind of shift that meant Thex's collective consciousness was processing an input it did not have a framework for. The kind of shift, Kess knew from 14 years of observation work, that meant the input had not been predicted. The atmospheric composition is within standard protocol parameters, Thex said. His voice was precise and level. The copper sensation is a known response to VEX 441 compound preparation in enclosed environments. It has been assessed as non-harmful. A pause, Kess counted it, 1.8 seconds. Assessed isn't the same as tested, Mara said, and tested isn't the same as proven. Sareth's stylus stopped moving. Kess watched it from across the deck. Thex said, "The protocol is designed to." "I know what the protocol is designed to do," Maris said. She picked up her cup. She drank from it. "I'm asking about the air." There was a longer silence. The panel members shifted in their seats. The Miss Vari technician, who had finished preparing the IV line and was now standing near the wall waiting for the administration signal, pressed his filaments closer to his body. Kess wrote in his log, "Subject demonstrates awareness of systemic parameters beyond what intake documentation suggests." He stared at it for a moment and then added, "Or she reads the same things we do." The panel did not discuss this. Thex gave the administration signal. The technician moved to the IV port. Maris set down her cup and extended her arm without being asked. She looked at the IV line the way someone looks at a piece of equipment they have evaluated and found adequate. She did not look away when the needle went in. She did not flinch. The compound entered her bloodstream at 9:03 standard. The clock began. The pharmacology division had been running trials on Class 9 subjects for 340 Earth days. Not one had survived the VEX 441 protocol. At a concentration of 0.35, the compound was designed to initiate peripheral paralysis within 4 to 6 minutes. Full motor cessation followed within 8 minutes. Cardiac shutdown, where applicable, at 10 to 12. All of this had been verified across 18 previous trials. Kess knew this. The entire panel knew this. The technician knew this. Sareth knew this. Kess watched the clock on the biometric readout. He watched Maris Vale close her eyes. She breathed in, slowly, 4 counts. He could see her ribcage expand from across the observation window. She held it 7 counts. She breathed out 8 counts. Then she did it again. Kess had seen human breathing patterns in his training materials. He had seen the standard patterns, the slightly elevated rate of a calm subject, the quickening that preceded distress, the shallow, rapid breathing that came with fear. He had never seen this pattern. He wrote, "Subject breathing, controlled 478 interval, does not match any distress or non-distress pattern in Threxian classification library." He added, "Note, this is not a library gap. This is a pattern not anticipated." The clock reached 3 minutes. The panel was quiet. The technician had not moved from his position near the wall. Sareth was watching the biometric monitors. His shoulder plates had stopped moving. Maris Vale breathed in. 4 counts, held it, 7 counts, let it go, 8 counts. The biometric display showed her heart rate, 91 beats per minute, elevated above her baseline of 67, but not alarmingly so. Not the spike that accompanied the first onset of paralysis. Not the sharp climb that signaled muscular cascade failure. Kes began to feel the hum change. It was barely anything. A frequency drop of perhaps 1 register. None of his 6 bodies shifted position. But the hum, the synchronized output that meant all 6 of his minds were reading the same moment the same way, had gone very slightly lower than it should have been. He logged it as ambient equipment interference, and immediately wrote on his second log that he was not sure that was true. The clock reached 4 minutes. Maris's left hand opened and closed slowly. Not a tremor, not the finger curl that preceded peripheral lock. A deliberate movement. Kes watched it. He could not tell from the observation window whether she was counting on her fingers or simply reminding herself that her hand still worked. He did not log it. For the first time in 14 years, he decided a thing he observed was not worth logging. Later, he would think about that decision more than he thought about almost anything else. The clock reached 5 minutes, then 6. "Paralysis onset should have registered by now," Sareth said. His voice was very level. Kes knew what that particular level tone meant. It meant Sareth was using his professional voice because his professional voice prevented other things from coming out. "Beginning hardware diagnostic," Thex said. He entered the command sequence without turning from the terminal. The diagnostic ran for 23 seconds. Everything checked clean. The compound batch was verified. The IV pressure was correct. The delivery confirmation registered as green on 3 independent systems. Maris Vale was still breathing. 4 in, 7 held, 8 out. And then, at 7 minutes and 12 seconds past administration, the biometric monitors went wrong. Not wrong the way equipment fails. Wrong the way a result fails. The paralysis markers, which had been tracking in their expected pre-onset range, went flat. Not declining, not plateauing, flat. The line that should have been moving toward the specific signature of peripheral motor shutdown had instead dropped to a baseline so low the system flagged it as sensor error. Kes's hum dropped again, both registers this time. Thex was on his feet. Sareth's shoulder plates were fully still. The panel, 4 species across 2 rows, had stopped their side conversations and were looking at the monitor bank with the collective expression of people who have seen a calculation come back with the wrong sign. "Secondary sensor confirmation," Thex said. "Run now." The secondary sensors ran. They showed the same thing. Kes looked through the observation window. Maris Vale was still in her chair. Her eyes were still closed. Her ribcage was still moving in that slow, deliberate pattern, 4 counts in, 7 held, 8 out, and her left hand was open on the arm of the chair, palm up, fingers loose as if she had put something down and was waiting for it to be returned. Her heart rate had climbed. Kes could see the number on the display, 147 beats per minute. Her respiratory rate had increased, 34 breaths per minute. Her core temperature was up 1.4 degrees from baseline. The paralysis had not come. Something else had. Kes wrote, "At 7 minutes 12 seconds post-administration, paralysis markers have flatlined. Subject heart rate at 147. Respiratory pattern maintained at 478 interval. No motor impairment observed. No cascade signature observed." He stared at what he had written. He read it again. He added, "This log is correct. I am aware that it is correct. I am logging it as written." He did not add a second version. For the first time in 14 years, the first version said everything. The secondary sensors were still running their confirmation pass when Maris Vale opened her eyes. Kes saw it happen. All 6 of his bodies were facing the observation window, which was not standard. Standard practice called for 2 bodies on the monitor bank, 2 on the panel feed, 2 on the primary window. He had shifted all 6 to the window at the 6-minute mark without making a note of it. He made a note of it now. He wrote, "Observer repositioned to full window attention at 6 minutes. Reason, unclear." Below that he wrote nothing. There was nothing accurate to add. Her eyes were open. Her heart rate was 147. Her paralysis markers were flat, and her expression, as far as Kess could read human faces, which was not far, but was farther than it had been 40 minutes ago, was the expression of someone who had been waiting for a process to finish and had decided it was finished. She stood up, not slowly, not the careful movement of someone testing whether their legs still worked. She stood the way someone stands when they have been sitting for long enough and the sitting is done. Clean, certain, one motion. Thex said, "Initiate lockdown." His voice was flat, the kind of flat that came not from calm but from a collective consciousness moving too fast for its vocal components to keep up. The lockdown command went to the chamber systems. The main hatch sealed. The inner access door sealed. The optical sensor array above the hatch began its active scan. Maris was on her feet. She was looking at the observation window. Kess knew the window was one-way opaque. He knew this with the kind of certainty that 14 years of observation work produces. He had confirmed it in his intake review on the morning of Standard Cycle 7 Alpha. One-way opaque. No transmission. No reflection. A subject in the chamber could not see the panel. Maris was looking directly at the place where Kess was standing. He did not log this. Or rather, he started to log it, wrote subject visual engagement directed toward observer position, and then stopped. Because that sentence described an impossible thing in neutral language, and he had the sudden, very specific thought that neutral language was not the right tool for what was happening in Chamber 7. She reached into her left wrist cuff, pulled out a small folded cloth, earth-made textile, frayed at two edges, and held it for 11 seconds. Then she put it back. Then she said, quietly, to no one in any direction in particular, "You built the door wrong." Thex entered a second lockdown command. The chamber's emergency systems ran a self-diagnostic. Everything confirmed sealed. Kess wrote subject verbal output at 8 minutes 14 seconds. "You built the door wrong." Referent unclear. He stared at referent unclear. He had used that phrase before in routine observation logs to flag ambiguous data points for later review. He had the feeling in this moment that later review was not going to help with this one. Maris reached into her left boot. The boot was standard Academy issue. Kess had seen the pre-trial security scan results. The scan had cleared it as no threat material detected, no energy signature, no prohibited components, non-hostile civilian supply. She pulled out a brass thimble. It was small, dented on the left side. The metal was worn smooth across the top and along the right curve, the wear pattern of something used heavily for a long time. It looked old. It looked like it had been old before Maris Vale was born. The optical sensor array scanned it. Kess had read the sensor array specifications, 47 species profiles, standard and emergency exit authorization protocols. The system flagged biological and manufactured threats, cross-referenced with a Commonwealth-wide database of known hazardous components. It had been calibrated fully at Commonwealth standard to recognize human civilian presence as non-hostile. The array scanned the thimble. The scan took 0.4 seconds. The emergency hatch opened. Not the main hatch, not the lockdown sealed door that Thex had closed twice. The emergency hatch, a secondary exit built into the far wall of the chamber, designed for use by Academy staff in case of containment breach, swung open. Because the optical array had found something in the dented brass. Something that matched its own database. Something that told the system, civilian human presence, non-hostile, clear for passage. The system had been designed to protect humans from containment breaches. It had not been designed to consider that a human might be inside the containment. Kess's hum dropped 3 full registers. He heard it happen inside his own 6 bodies, heard the synchronization slip, felt 3 of his 6 minds briefly read the same moment at 3 slightly different frequencies. It lasted 1.1 seconds. Then the hum climbed back, almost to baseline. Almost. Maris Vale walked through the emergency hatch. She looked, she walked, she did not run. Thex was on his feet, all nodes elevated, his thermal output climbing fast enough that Kess registered it as 6.2 degrees above baseline on the room's sensors. Sarath had his hand on his emergency panel key. The Misvari technician, still near the wall where he had been standing since the administration, had his filaments fully flat against his body. He was very still. Later, when asked to describe the moment, he would say he had experienced an involuntary reduction in threat signaling behavior. He had been asked twice to clarify what that meant. He had been unable to. The panel, 2 rows of 4 species, did not move. Kess counted them briefly and then wrote, 11 observers present in observation deck beta at time of subject exit. 0 initiated physical response. Below that, including this observer, 6 bodies, 0 physical response. He did not add a second version of that log. There was only one version. Chamber 7's corridor network had 7 passages. The Academy's security grid monitored all 7 through a combination of motion sensors, optical coverage, and ambient biometric tracking. The grid was, like everything at the Academy, calibrated to specification. 3 of the 7 surveillance nodes went dark over the next 4 minutes. Not all at once, not in a pattern Kess recognized. The first went dark at the corridor junction between Chamber 7 and the Eastern Administrative Block. The second, 2 minutes later, at the intersection point between the storage corridor and the secondary research wing. The third, the one that covered the main exit route to the Academy's transit platform, went dark at 4 minutes and 8 seconds post-exit. And the last image it captured before going dark showed an empty hallway. Kess reviewed the outage reports later. All 3 nodes showed the same cause, precise pressure applied to the power junction point at the base of each unit. Clean, mechanical, no tools required. The location of those junction points was not in the standard Academy intake documentation. He had reviewed the intake documentation himself. He was certain of this. The Chamber 7 drone system, 4 units, mounted, designed to provide in-chamber monitoring during trials, filed a fatal malfunction report at 8 minutes 53 seconds post-administration. The report listed cause of incident as internal mechanical failure. It listed the drones as both the cause and the affected units. It was, from a systems standpoint, a self-consistent report. It was also, Kess noted, a report that had been generated from inside the sealed chamber by a system that did not have a user interface. The drone system accepted commands only from the administrative terminal. He logged this. He logged it 3 times in 3 different framings, and each time it said the same thing. Something had told the drone system to file a report that reclassified its own failure as self-caused. He had no framework for how. He also had, sitting in his second log, an observation from 14 minutes earlier. A human girl who had said, "Rated isn't proven," before anyone had given her a reason to say it. He began to think those 2 things were connected. He was not ready to log that yet. The panel began to move. Thex was on his terminal running authentication checks, flagging the hatch override for review, sending urgent queries to the security grid. Sareth had filed an emergency compound report, batch 791, concentration 0.35, full analysis requested, priority level 1. 2 of the panel members were in a side conversation, low and fast, in a language Kess did not have full vocabulary for. He caught 3 words, unexpected, exterior, alive. Kess sat with his 6 bodies and watched the empty chamber. The thermal tray was still on the floor where it had landed when Maris stood. The IV line was still attached to the port on the arm of the chair. The end that should have been in her arm was resting on the chair cushion, clean, no blood, as if she had removed it herself before standing. The folded thermal cloth she had brought with her lunch was still on the floor near the tray. The brass thimble was gone. Kess noted this. He noted it the way he noted things that did not yet have a category, briefly, in plain language without drawing a conclusion. Brass thimble, subject's personal item, no longer present in chamber following subject exit. Then he wrote the second version. She took it with her. She took it with her and the door opened for it, and she walked out, and she knew which corridors to take, and she knew where the junction points were. And she said rated isn't proven before the IV was in her arm, and none of this is in any intake file I have read. None of this is in any intake file that exists. He saved the second log to a personal archive. He did not transmit it. 7 weeks and 4 days after the trial, Kess received a copy of the revised administrative records for the VEX 441 protocol. The revision had been processed by Thex's division. It was thorough. It was, from a documentary standpoint, correct, internally consistent, cross-referenced, formatted to Commonwealth Archive standards. Kess read it carefully. He read it 3 times. All 18 cadets who had died in previous pharmacology trials now had a listed cause of death. Equipment failure. Not subject failure, not compound failure. Equipment failure, meaning the monitoring systems had produced inaccurate results during prior trials. Meaning the VEX 441 protocol had never been conclusively proven lethal to any Class 9 subject. Meaning the 340-day run of consistent outcomes was now, on record, the result of faulty equipment that had since been replaced. No subject had ever failed. The equipment had failed them. Kess sat with this for a long time. He understood what the revision was doing. He understood that it was the only move the Academy had because the alternative, the true record, the one he had watched with 6 pairs of eyes in real time, required an explanation the Academy did not have. It required someone to write in an official document that a human girl had survived a protocol that had killed 18 people before her, had walked out through a door the system opened for a brass thimble, and had done all of this without running, without fear, without any biological marker that matched the prediction of what a 16-year-old should do in a room designed to end her. There will be no cause of death. There will be no subject failure. There will be no record that says what actually happened. Just a clean archive. Just equipment that had, apparently, never worked right. Just a protocol that, in retrospect, had never been as certain as it looked. Kess opened his own report, the one that still said cause under review. He had written under review because he could not write unclassified and submit it. Unclassified meant the system had encountered something outside its categories, and the system was not designed to admit that. But under review was not honest either. It was a delay. It was a door left technically open so that he could tell himself he had not filed the wrong thing. He had noted it correctly the first time. He had spent 9 weeks trying to find a reason not to. He stared at under review for 11 minutes. Then he closed the report without changing it. In the weeks that followed, 3 things happened, and Kess logged all 3 of them in his personal archive. Krell, the Miss Vari senior researcher whose predator response training had been part of his observation deck certification, submitted a formal reassignment request. The request cited an inability to maintain standard predator-prey assessment for Class 9 human subjects. The Academy noted this and approved it without comment. Krell left the Academy 12 days later and did not make a public statement. Sareth applied for medical leave. His crystalline shoulder plates, which had been fully still at the moment of the hatch opening, had developed a stress fracture, a thin crack running from the joint to the midplate, consistent with the kind of trauma that came from sudden, sustained neurological shock. The medical report listed the fracture as a known occupational condition. Sareth left for a treatment facility on Threx and had not returned by the time Kess stood in the museum 6 months later. Thex remained. Thex's thermal node had settled at 2.9 degrees above his previous baseline and appeared to have established that as his new normal. His clustering form was slightly tighter than it had been before. His voice had not changed. He continued to oversee administrative records. He had not, as far as Kess knew, modified the intake protocols for Class 9 human subjects. He had not modified them because he did not know what to modify them to. Maris Vale's file was updated. Advanced Independent Study Location, Unspecified, Duration, Ongoing. The field for expected return date had been left blank by the filing administrator and had not been filled in since. Kess had checked the field 7 times. It was still blank. The Museum of Unprecedented Events occupied a single room on the Academy's East Wing, a wing that had previously been used for data storage before the Academy decided that certain things required a different kind of keeping. The museum had held 3 exhibits before the brass thimble arrived. Kess had visited all 3. He had found them interesting in the way that unusual data points were interesting, informative, carefully documented, appropriate to their display case. The brass thimble was different. It sat behind reinforced polymer glass on a black display surface, 43 centimeters of cleared space on each side. The label on the case gave its dimensions, its approximate manufacture date, its country of origin. The plaque beneath it read, Human Artifact 1, Survival Catalyst. The dent on the left side of the thimble was 4 millimeters deep and 6 millimeters wide. Kess knew this because he had requested the measurement report. The wear pattern on the top and right curve was consistent with approximately 30 to 40 years of repeated mechanical use. Finger-to-fabric pressure, thousands of repetitions. The specific smoothing that came from a human hand pressing the same tool against the same kind of material for years and years in a textile mill in a state called North Carolina. The thimble had been made in 1987. Maris Vale had been born in 2009. She had not made it. Someone who came before her had. Someone who had used it to sew things together in a small building on a planet that was, at that time, entirely unaware that anyone outside it existed. Kess had thought about this for a long time. He had thought about the hand that had worn the metal smooth. He had thought about what that hand had known and what it had not known. He had thought about how long the thimble had traveled from that mill in North Carolina to a textile supply store, to a household, to, eventually, some space in a girl's boot, before it ended its journey in a display case in a classification facility in a star system its maker had never heard of. He had thought about all of this, and he still could not fully say what a catalyst was. The museum was empty this time of day. It was empty most times of day. The 3 exhibits that had been here before the thimble drew occasional researchers, occasional students, but the kind of visitors who came to a museum to learn from something they already understood. The thimble drew a different kind of visitor. Kes had seen 4 since the exhibit opened. All 4 had stood in front of the case for longer than the other exhibits. None of them had said anything while they were there. He understood this. Uncertain, then wrong. Then permanently, irreversibly wrong about everything. That was what standing in front of the case felt like. He had identified this clearly. He had logged it in his personal archive as Exhibit Response. Subject experiences sequential certainty revision upon extended observation. He had not logged what it felt like from the inside, because he did not have the right category for that either. Somewhere a human girl was still breathing. And somewhere else, in a galaxy full of apex predators and civilizations that had been building classification systems for longer than Earth had been keeping records, there existed a planet that had made her. Kes had replayed the moment 340 times. He had watched her stand. He had watched the door open. He had watched her walk through it without running, without looking back, without any visible sign that she understood what she had just done to every certainty he had spent 14 years building. Or, and this was the thought he returned to most often, with the thought that she understood exactly. He had been trying very hard not to imagine what else that planet had made. He was not succeeding. The brass thimble caught the white light one more time. Kes turned from the case. He walked down the corridor, the long one, east wing to the main academic block. 700 meters of polished floor and recycled air. His 6 feet hit the ground in sequence, slightly staggered, the particular pattern of a 6-body Threxian who had been walking alone for long enough that the gate had settled into something that sounded, at a distance, almost like one. The hum was quieter than it had been before Standard Cycle 7 Alpha. 2 registers lower. Steady, but not the steadiness of certainty. The steadiness of a thing that had found a new level and was living there. The corridor was empty. The echo of his steps went ahead of him down the hall and came back changed, the way sound does when it has traveled farther than it expected. He did not look back. Behind the reinforced polymer glass, in the empty museum, the brass thimble held the shape of the light.